Let's now take this opportunity to go into the silence. Let us affirm for these next few moments that all cares, responsibilities, and concerns are left at the doorstep. We affirm that this particular time is given to inner communion, the divine search. In a comfortable position with the palms upturned on the lap to indicate our receptivity. Let's begin to simply watch the breath. Feel the inhalations and exhalations as they come and go, but make no attempt to regulate or control the flow. Simply be observant. Be as detached from your own breathing process as you would be if you were observing someone else breathe. Yet at the same time, be very concentrated on each inhalation and each exhalation. Feeling the coolness as the air enters the nostrils and the warmth as it leaves. And know that the breath itself is a prayer. Breath itself is divine. Should the mind wander away from the process of breathing, gently bring it back as many times as needed without any judgment or self-criticism. Again and again, back to the breath. Now let's move our attention to that of gratitude. It's always auspicious to end a meditation with gratitude, but today we're going to be very particular about our gratitude. Aside from all the blessings that are bestowed upon us, even the fact that we are here together in fellowship, let us express inner gratitude for this building, since this is the very final day that Unity is using this church. Let us feel gratitude for all that has happened inside this sacred space over the years. The joys, the friendships, and of course even the challenges, the frustrations, the friction. For all of those, become a part of our spiritual growth. And let us hope that and pray that this building be continuing to inspire, to educate in its new incarnation. Let us all feel blessed as we move on to the new incarnation of unity in Grand Rapids. Om, peace. Amen. Well, good morning. As always, a pleasure to be here, and I feel actually quite privileged to be here on your very last day here. I'm going to miss coming out here, but I'm excited at the possibility of doing a few services here and there as needed if I am called on Walker. I've been a guest speaker at Walker a number of times in the past, and I am extremely excited to join you in your new home when it's ready and you all move in. So that's great. And Ray, thank you. Whenever I come, he always knows to play Beatles songs. This week, someone sent me an article from the New York Times. It appeared the day after the Beatles appeared on Ed Sullivan, 58 years ago. And his review was abysmal. I mean, he thought that the Beatles had absolutely no talent and that Ed Sullivan wasted his precious television time on talentless lads from Liverpool. I go, why didn't I read this back then? I've wasted my whole adult life listening to them. Darn, I didn't know that they weren't talented. You live and you learn. So today I'm going to talk about happiness, which is an extension of the daily word today. And let me ask you a question. If we were talking about happiness, having a conversation about happiness, and I told you that perhaps you need to be more stoic, how would you react to that? What do you think of when somebody says, oh, this person has a very stoic personality? Usually we think of someone who is entirely emotionless, has the stereotypical British upper lip, someone who, when told, your house just blew up, would say, oh, I must get out the tent then, shan't I? That is what we think of as Stoicism. And you know something? We could not be more wrong about what true Stoicism is. Stoicism is an ancient philosophy. It began with the Greeks. It was adopted by a number of Romans, great Roman philosophers such as Seneca and Marcus Aurelius. And it really, really resonates with the Eastern traditions of the Hindu yoga tradition and Buddhism. And there is no known connection. There is no evidence that the Stoics were directly influenced by the masters of the East, which just proves that enlightenment is enlightenment and that no one society owns it, and that there's something, if something is going to happen in one place, chances are it's going to percolate somewhere else as well. That's just kind of sort of how the world works. And I've been studying Stoicism as of late. And when I found out that today's theme was happiness, I decided to offer a Stoic's view of happiness, because they're all about happiness. They're not about just sitting there expressionless, attempting to endure pain without any expression of pain. No, the true meaning of Stoicism is simply that we strive for contentment, understanding who we are as human beings, move forward as best we can in circumstances that are challenging, and always make the attempt to come back to rest in contentment and happiness. Right? That just doesn't sound like Stoic the way we understand it. There's also there was a Greek school called the Cynics. And of course, when we talk about somebody who is a cynic, that's usually in a pejorative term, right? But the Cynics were not cynics, if you will. When I think of somebody who's cynical philosophically, you think of somebody who's going to say, who if you tell them, enlightenment can be yours, and they're going to go, yeah, right. No, that's not the Greek school of cynicism, but that's a whole other story. Let's talk about Stoicism. So Stoicism has several points that if we incorporate them into our lives, we will be happier. We can be happier. But whenever I talk about happiness, I always issue this disclaimer. There are situations where we simply cannot be happy. If we are in an abusive relationship, we can't just say, well, we're going to affirm happiness. No, we have to remove ourselves, if we can, from those situations. If we're in a soul-killing job, we may have to remove ourselves from that soul-killing job. But along the way, it's still good to strive for happiness, to study happiness, and to make every possible effort to go in that direction. And when we are finally removed from those situations, then we will already have a head start on acquiring happiness and contentment. So let's begin with a few important points of Stoicism. And the first one is to remember the dichotomy of control. This is what they refer that to. And that is, some things are up to us and some things are not. And what we have to do is place our focus on what we can change. For instance, developing good character is something that is within our control. Studying, making every attempt to have a good job, attempting to find the the best mate possible, committing ourselves to our family, committing ourselves to our community. Those are things that are in control. We have to not place as much emphasis on those things that are not in control. And remember the role of judgment. Things in themselves don't hurt us. It is our judgment, it is our opinion about things that frustrate us. So for instance, I think a good example is this. Let's say you're in the vestibule there, you're having your coffee, and all of a sudden you feel this jolt that someone has pushed you, and you spill coffee all over yourself, and you might go down. And the first thing you're going to think of is, who is this idiot who is just falling over me? And then you look and you see that it is a blind person, and the blind person is extremely apologetic. Immediately, let's hope your attitude changes from one of frustration and anger to one of compassion. So we have to look at the circumstances like this. And this is a little bit harder, if the reason that the person upset you, spilled your coffee and almost knocked you down, if you find out that that person was just goofing around, being silly, trying to get a laugh from someone, you're probably going to be more frustrated. But when we're able to say that this person is handicapped in a similar way than a blind person, then our blood pressure goes down a little bit. More compassion. Doesn't mean that that guy doesn't need a good talking to, trust me. But nonetheless, we have to strive to keep our composure. The contemplation of the sage, and I know this really resonates with Unity people, okay? Imagine that a wise person, it could be Socrates, it could be your pastor Mike, anybody, is watching over your actions. Jesus, watching over your actions when you're facing a difficult situation, and ask yourself, what would that person say? Whether it's Socrates, Jesus, Pastor Mike, a wise grandparent or parent, some figure in your life who may not be present in the physical, ask that question. And oftentimes, you will get the right answer. Philosophical journaling, writing is so important. Paramhansa Yogananda, a great Hindu mystic, said, if you study, if you read for 1 hour, write for 2 hours, and meditate for 3 hours. He felt that journaling, writing was so very important. And I can say from my own life, I've kept journals since 1973, I think, 1973. And it has been a treasure in my life to be able to not only the act of journaling, but then going back and reading the journals and to see what kind of growth may or may not have happened. Daily review. At the end of the day, really concentrate on how you reacted to certain situations. Years ago, I gave a recital of the Bhagavad Gita, the great Hindu scripture. Some of you were here. You might remember that the Bhagavad Gita happens on a battlefield, and you have two opposing armies ready to go at it with one another. And I explained that the core of that story is that one army represents our good tendencies and the other army represents our negative tendencies. And so one meditates at the end of the day to find out which army won the battle that day. Transform adversity into something better. When you do encounter adversity, this is what you attempt to do. Always attempt to create some goodness in any situation. Respond to it with virtue. You can take any negative situation, or most any negative situation, respond to it with virtue, and it becomes more palatable, more easy to go down. And premeditation of adversity. We know that adversity is going to happen. We just know that's how life works. When you're able to imagine things without calling them to you, without being pessimistic, it's a very challenging balance, right? Because some people are always just waiting for something bad to happen. You don't want to be that guy or gal. You want to be someone who is optimistic and yet realistic to know that challenges are going to appear, and imagine how you might react if a particular challenge came your way. There's something called the Stoic reserve clause. When you start a project, when you go on a trip, make a plan, you say to yourself, fate willing, or God willing, right? Remember, I'm sure you've all heard the old saying that man makes plans and God laughs. Well, just be humble enough to be able to make a plan and inwardly say, Lord willing. I know a great phrase that I picked up years ago, Lord willing and the creek don't rise, this is going to happen. So this is what we attempt to do, to just be humble in making our plans. Then there is contemplation of the whole. When we realize that we are just a tiny part of the universe, but part of the universe nonetheless. Just because we're a tiny part, that doesn't mean we're second class. We are actually part of the whole, and the whole is divine. So for a moment, expand your mind to encompass the entire cosmos. This is a good meditation, to expand your mind into the entire cosmos. Know that we are a part of it, but that our wants and our desires and our identity are just a tiny part of that. And then the view from above. Sometimes, isn't it awesome to be able to see those fabulous vistas that are taken from cameras in drones? And when we see the world, when we see the earth, a picture of the earth taken from outer space, it changes our understanding of who we are. So imagine that you are viewing situations from above. Change. Know that, surrender to the understanding that life is change. All things must pass. Correct? All things must pass. And when they pass, they often give way to something new. Those who are able to embrace change are the ones who are the survivors. In the professional world, I remember a friend of mine who was a co-owner of a construction business. He had to let a woman go because she absolutely refused to learn how to work a computer. Right? This is, back in like the 90s or something, and she just thought she could skate without having to update her skills. It doesn't work that way. A little Latin here. Memento mori. Remember our mortality. Remember that we are going to die. And contemplate that. But again, without being morbid, without being pessimistic, just knowing that it is part of our destiny to relinquish these mortal coils. But we go on. That's the wonderful thing about the unity philosophy or the Buddhist, Hindu, or even the Stoic philosophy, that we go on. That death is not the end, but it is part of the process. And when we remember our death, when we remember that these bodies are mortal, the soul is immortal, but the bodies are mortal, we have a better understanding of who we are. We concentrate more on that soul than we do the body. Live with gratitude. That's one of the key points of Stoicism. And I mention it every time for those of you who have not seen me before. Whenever I meditate, I always end with gratitude, here and in my personal life as well. I do not end a meditation without a few moments or minutes with gratitude. Whether it is focusing on something specific, I'm gratitude for this home that I live in. I'm grateful for my wife. Sometimes I think about how many movements the body had to make to get into that meditation seat. How many thousands of movements from getting out of bed to washing to then, and I usually do a few yoga exercises before I sit. How many movements is this body able to make before it sits down? Live in the present moment. That is a challenge for most of us, including myself. But if we can live without our minds racing and worrying about the future, because that is so often a source of anxiety, and instead plan for the future rationally. And remember that the present moment is all we have. So when you start to feel anxious, be mindful of that and return your attention to the present moment. And remember that when future events do arrive, we'll face them with the same rationality, the same composure that hopefully you're experiencing in that moment. act for the common good. Act for the common good. I'm sure you've heard it before, that one of the recipes for happiness is doing something for somebody else. That's just so obvious. And it doesn't have to be a particular individual. It can be the community. It can be the nation. It can be the world. Anything that you do that gets you out of your own headspace. If you are feeling frustration, if you are feeling saddened, if you are feeling alone, the greatest thing to do is to act outside of taking care of your own little concerns. It's the happiness that comes from that can be immeasurable. And finally, weigh your impressions with care. Don't take things at face value. Don't make hasty judgments. Take a step back. Weigh everything before you make a decision, before expressing an opinion. And if you lack enough firm evidence to move in this direction or that direction, suspend making the judgment entirely. If you are able to. Sometimes we're forced into making a judgment, and we do have to make those decisions at the spur of the moment. When you have the luxury of being able to make a decision with the ability to study beforehand, to gather evidence, then by all means, take that luxury. So those are the key points of Stoicism. If anybody wants to learn more about Stoicism, I can recommend a wonderful book. It's a new book. It's called Breakfast with Seneca. And Seneca was the capo di tutti capi. It's an Italian expression, the boss of all bosses. He was the capo di tutti capi of the Roman Stoics. And he, along with Marcus Aurelius, he would be his like consigliere, they left us a tremendous legacy in how to live a content and happy life. And so Breakfast with Seneca is the name of it, and it is written by a former Grand Rapidian, actually, by the name of David Fiedler, who's now living in Sarajevo. So I wish you happiness, and I wish you the ability to recover from unhappiness, because I'll leave you with this. We can't be happy every moment of our lives. The Stoics knew this, the Buddhists knew this, the Hindus knew this and know this. But one way that we can measure our spiritual progress is not that we're happy all the time, but that we recover much, much quicker than before we adopted these spiritual teachings, right? Think about this, that if I was to ask you about something that happened in grade school, and you say, oh gosh, it was a horrible day, people were picking on me, and some kid gave me a black eye or tore up my homework, whatever it is, I might say, well, are you still sad about that? He said, no, that was like 65 years ago. I'm fine. Well, then, if time was the only thing that made that better, just try to compress that as best you can. Try to compress that. So hopefully it doesn't take 65 years to recover your happiness. Try recovering it in a month. Try recovering it in a week. Try recovering it in a few minutes, depending on what the issue is. So I bless you. I bless this wonderful building that has served us so well over the years. And I look forward to seeing you, as I say, in your your new incarnations. God bless and namaste.